Okay, I got a question for you. What do Andrew Huberman, Jordan Peterson, and Joe Rogan all have in common? Find out next on the Just Jesus podcast. Welcome back to the Just Jesus podcast, episode number 8. Here we go. 8's a great number. It's one more than 7, but it is one less than 9. But 8's good today. Coming to you live from the Just Jesus studios, a.k.a. just a room in my house. But it sounds better. I like the Just Jesus studios. Makes it sound more official, even though it's just a room in my house. But for now, it's the Just Jesus studios. It's good to have you. Whoever you are, wherever you're listening from, glad to have you. If you're coming back, thanks for joining us again here on the Just Jesus podcast. And if you're new, good to have you. If you're a first-time listener, it's great to have you. This is episode number 8. And in case you're new to Just Jesus, it is exactly that. It's not more complicated than that. It's just simply Jesus. We talk about just Jesus, all things past, present, and future. But more importantly, what we try to do is focus on what that means to us today, bring the relevancy to it all. And I think that's really the key. And so if you're someone who is just beginning to explore your faith in Jesus Christ, or maybe you're not even quite that far, but you're curious to hear more about Jesus, or maybe you're someone who's new and you're looking to grow your faith, or maybe you're someone that has had a professed faith for Jesus Christ for a long time, my desire and goal is that there's something in each one of these podcasts for each category. I'm not sure if we're doing that or we're getting there, but that's the goal. So it's good to have you along. I am your host, Joel Wright, and glad to have you. If you haven't listened to the first 7 episodes, they're available right here on the YouTube channel. You can go back and you can view them all or listen to them all. There's nothing to view, but you can listen to them all. And we've gone through quite a few different angles and different subjects, and we're tackling a brand new one today. Well, maybe kind of part 2 of last week if you want to tie them together. But we're going to kind of talk a little bit more about sort of a modern day view of Jesus. And just to get kind of into it, really where all this is, we live in a very divisive world, right? We don't need to go through all that. I think that's obvious. We live in a very divisive world. It's fueled by social media, and I'm sure there are many people with better credentials that can discuss that better than I can. But it's obvious to all of us. It doesn't take much to realize we live in a very divisive world, right? And in that type environment, any opinion that does not line up with someone else's or with the status quo is challenged. And there's times, I guess that's a good thing. I mean, I always find that that's the best way to find truth, because truth can withstand examination. If something can't withstand examination, it's not really truth. So I'm not saying all this is bad. There are pros and cons to it all. And depending on who you talk to, there are definitely more pros than cons, or definitely more cons than pros. However, there is a part of all this that in our world we live in today, that the topic of religion has become very divisive. And I've said this now on this podcast several times, and just to reiterate it, when we're talking about just Jesus, we're sticking in that sort of parameter. It's just Jesus. We're not getting into religion. We're not getting into theology or different doctrines. When it comes to Jesus, we're sticking to simply faith in who Jesus is. Now, is there some theology mixed into that? Maybe so, but that's not the point of this. The point of this is not to tell you what to believe, but to simply introduce you to things about Jesus Christ that maybe you didn't know about, or maybe to expand your knowledge so that you can grow your own belief. Because like anything, it's important that we all establish our own baseline of belief. You can't use my baseline or someone else's. Neither can I use yours. Each person needs to have their own baseline of faith. That's why, to me, as a believer in Jesus Christ, that's one of the things that makes believing in Jesus so amazing, is because he can become whatever baseline you need him to be. And so what makes Jesus real to me may not be what makes Jesus real to you, but we can both come to the acknowledgement and the faith that he's real. And so we live in a very divisive world, and in that divisiveness, there are certain subjects that just seem to breed an antagonistic response. And one of those, we talked about religion. There's others, politics being probably one of the biggest one. Social justice. There's a lot of them out there we could list, but one of them happens to have landed on the subject of Jesus. And there is there is a wide variety of sort of takes on all this, and YouTube and social media is filled with people giving their opinion. And I'm not just simply trying to throw my hat in the room into the ring here, but I think it's worth at least exploring the fact that the topic of Jesus has become divisive, and those who confess to believe in Jesus are labeled in certain ways. And if you say you believe in Jesus, that can get you in, sometimes, especially in the woke agenda, the cancel culture, that can get you canceled. But there seems to be a resurgence, if I could say it that way, that is starting to build when it comes to Jesus. Now, when I say Jesus, if you're new to the podcast, and some of you that maybe have listened to several episodes, I want to make sure that you understand when I say Jesus, again, I'm not equating Jesus and religion in the same category. They're not synonyms. Maybe we can get into that in another podcast, but for just sake of clarity, when I say Jesus, I'm not using the name Jesus as a synonym for religion. So when you hear the word Jesus, don't substitute in your mind religion. So there has been a renewed interest in Jesus, maybe not in religion or organized religion. In fact, statistics play out that there's been a mass exodus away from organized religion, which I'm actually in favor of, to be honest with you. I know some of you may not agree with me on that, but in my opinion, I think the move away from organized religion is absolutely, has been vital in our desire to find the true, authentic, real Jesus Christ. I think religion, especially in a lot of ways, there's not saying that there's not good things about religion and sincere people within the confines of religion. However, religion has done more to damage the image of Christ than it has ever done to enhance the image of Christ. Again, I'm not saying all religion's bad or all people that practice religion are bad, but in overall, the statistics show that people are leaving organized religion. But those same statistics, two in particular by the Barna Research Group and Lifeway Research Group, that are the two most prominent researchers of sort of faith-based topics, both of them have done extensive research on this and have discovered that statistics play out that people are turned off by religion but have a high curiosity to know more about Jesus, especially when you get into the millennials and even further into Gen Z. We don't know about the generations to come, but in those particular ones, that there has seemed to be a disdain for organized religion, but an increase in a desire to hear more about Jesus. So in order to do that, you've got to separate Jesus out of religion. If you don't do that, they become synonyms, and once Jesus becomes a synonym with religion, to me, you start to lose the power and the authenticity and the purity of who Jesus is. And so there is a resurgence that's beginning to happen on a renewed interest in Jesus Christ, but it's not coming from the it's not coming from the pulpits of religion. I believe it's starting to come from sort of the non-religious and even a non-Christian, if I could use it that way, non-Christian category. And to me, that's something that gets me excited. We talked about it extensively on this channel numerous times, but we mentioned things like He Gets Us and especially The Chosen. Both of those are coming from non-religious, non-organized religion angles to introduce people to who Jesus Christ is, and they have had massive amounts of success. I've said this numerous times. I'm not saying yay or nay on either one of them. I have found great value in both of them, but I believe there's a renewed interest in who Jesus is. But really, where the interest is coming from is not from religious circles, because religious circles already think they know who Jesus is and don't need to be told anything else. In fact, that's what we talked about in the little mini-series we did in episodes 3, 4, and 5, I believe it was. Yeah, 3, 4, and 5. Maybe it's 4, 5, and 6. One of those. We talked about in the little mini-series we did about the perfect storm that Jesus walked into. We talked about the historical context of when Jesus arrived, what was in the mind of those who He introduced Himself to when He came in the flesh. And we talked about how the fact that they missed His identity because they are already made up in their mind how He would come. And so I use that because, in my opinion, if we're not careful, we are in danger and rapidly heading towards repeating the same exact error. But if we would pay attention, just like there were voices out of religious circles that were announcing that Jesus was coming again, that Jesus was introducing Himself in a new way. We had this crazy guy, if you know anything about the Bible story of Jesus Christ, you know that his greatest hype man, we use a 21st century word, his greatest hype man, his greatest promoter was a crazy guy that was out in the middle of the desert who ate locusts and dressed in camel hair by the name of John the Baptist, who eventually just got his head cut off. But he became the greatest promoter of who Jesus was, but he had a somewhat of a strong following, but in some ways he turned people off because that's not who was going to announce Jesus. They were expecting Jesus to come and the Messiah to come announced in a way that fit with their agenda. And so I feel like this is happening again. And so being sort of plugged into the Christian community online and listening to different voices and hearing different takes, I'm beginning to hear a pattern emerge. And we saw it a little bit with He Gets Us, and we get it with The Chosen. But we're going to go a step further today because there's actually a resurgence in some very popular internet personalities that are not professed Christians, but are showing or voicing at least an openness or an interest in who Jesus is, or even confessing the fact that they believe in who Jesus is. And so I teased the opening with what does Andrew Huberman and Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan all have in common. We're going to kind of look through that today. Now, if you don't know who these men are, let me first start off by saying I'm not endorsing any of these men. Just a quick recap, and I may remind you later on when we get to the clips, is Andrew Huberman is a neuroscientist. He's super popular on YouTube. He goes through many different topics on YouTube relating to like neurobiology, neuroscientist, brain plasticity, sensory systems, all these different things. He goes into a bunch of chemicals in the brain, some interesting stuff. But I'm not endorsing him. I'm not suggesting you should go out and listen to his content. If you know about him, you've probably been introduced to him or seen him online. Maybe you didn't know who he was, but he's all over. He's extremely popular in the 20 to 30-year-old, especially in the males, 20 to 30-year-olds. He's got a huge following online. Jordan Peterson, kind of the same category. He's a psychologist, clinical psychologist. He's been a professor. He's a public intellectual that travels around giving speeches and talks. He really has gained a lot of widespread attention because he has been a strong critic of political correctness and identity politics. And he's also really gotten in a lot of hot water for being an advocate of individual responsibility in free speech. And he's a Canadian, and so he's gotten in trouble with the Canadian government because of it. But again, not endorsing him, but we're going to use him today. We're going to use Andrew Huberman. And the last one is Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is one of, if not the largest podcasts out there. A huge following. And again, Joe's not as Christian, and I'm not endorsing you go listen to his channel. There's a lot of things on there you probably shouldn't be listening to, but I'm going to use each one of these men because I think they're sharing something that to me, you got to pay attention to, because these men have huge reputations. These men have huge followings. These men are appealing to both all kinds of people from all different backgrounds, and they're speaking out on the subject of Jesus Christ and saying things about Jesus that in some ways could get you canceled if you say these things. But what's interesting to me is they are saying these things in a very positive way. And I, to be honest with you, I think it's making a difference. In fact, some of these clips have gone somewhat viral all over the internet because they have made, and you're probably going to recognize some of them when I play the audio, because you probably have seen them or heard of them, or at least snippets of them, because I feel like they're making a difference. And what I'm really sort of want to do today in exploring these clips is the fact that listen to what's being said outside of traditional circles about who God is and who Jesus Christ is. Because to me, as a believer in Jesus Christ who wants to see the message of Jesus Christ spread to as many people as we can, this is exciting, because I believe that Jesus Christ will use all methods and means to spread his message. And nobody has the right to determine who's allowed to speak about Jesus or not. Anybody can speak about Jesus. In fact, Jesus even said, if they're talking about me or if they're helping spread the message, let them be. Let them be. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from today, is that we've used that several times now, where the situation where the disciples came to Jesus and they were upset and they said, listen, hey, by the way, do you know that we found some guys who were they were sort of doing some stuff in your name and we didn't approve because we don't know about them. And Jesus said, let them be. Who's ever not against me is for me. Let's leave this alone. So this is kind of where I'm going from today, is listen, there is a growing group that is for Jesus Christ. Let's celebrate that and promote that. It may not fit with some with people's religious agenda or your religious identity or theology or doctrine. But for me, it's a good thing, because like the chosen, and he gets us, who has reached ears and voices that someone like me would never be able to reach. I believe these men are reaching the same audience, and that's huge, because I'm telling you, when you get introduced to who Jesus is, it will change your life. So let's get into these clips for a moment today if we can. And we're going to start with a clip from Andrew Huberman. Now, I will say the clip from Andrew Huberman that I'm going to play here for you today is about 6 minutes long. This is not directly tied to Jesus, but it's tied to his explanation why he believes in God, which I think is huge, because he is a world-renowned scientist. He is in a scientific community where it's filled with atheism, that's filled with agnostics, that's filled with a lot of antagonistic views for anyone that believes in God. And for someone like him, who has such a huge platform on social media and YouTube and is reaching many, many ears, I think it's awesome to hear someone like that promote his belief in God. And actually, he says some pretty profound things. Let's take a listen.
When you're talking about the brain and all the, I mean, you mentioned it last night, and this had me thinking. It's like, when you think how all that works, I have to take an aside and say, how could that happen in nature without a creator?
Yeah. So, well, here's the thing. I mean, we know that the programs, meaning genes, so genes, DNA, and there's DNA, then there's RNA, and then there's proteins. And proteins are the action end of the game, where they say, hey, like, grow over here, don't grow over there, mm-hmm. You know, become this kind of cell, dopamine cell or a serotonin cell. We know that those mechanisms are incredibly well conserved from mice to humans. Now, mm-hmm. certain things happen in the human brain that you don't see in other species, like the elaboration of the parts of the brain that are involved in context and planning, mm-hmm. especially. But the memory systems, the ones that control hormones, breathing, heart rate, they're very similar. Not exactly the same, but very similar.
Okay.
When you start to study and understand brain development, as I did, or neuroplasticity, or dopamine, you have to, meaning I don't care if you're an atheist, agnostic, or believer in creator, you have to step back and just go, wow, wow. Now, then of course there's this difference among scientists as to who believes in God, who doesn't. I'll just go on record. I'm very comfortable saying I believe in God. I do. I think there are many things that science can explain. There are certain things science can't explain, but I'll even go a step further, which is that all the elements of science are entirely compatible with the idea of there being a God. And I'm not the first scientist to say this. I mean, Einstein believed in God. Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychologists ever, clearly believed in God. There are many atheist scientists. There are agnostic scientists who are just kind of like unsure, right? And, you know, for me, I'm in absolute awe of biology. It's just incredible that we're sitting here having this conversation. It's just, it's with language, that there are little sound waves that you're perceiving and understanding. I mean, it's just, and I think the brain represents the apex of incredible in terms of biology. Like the heart is interesting, the immune system is interesting, the liver is interesting, but the brain is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the number of different ways you can move your body compared to another species. Think about what you did today. Think about what I was attempting to do today, right?
Yeah.
Spectacular. Think about technology, these lights, the, you know, Tesla cars, spaceships. I mean, the internet, I mean, unbelievable. And yet, oh, so real.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, we could talk a bit about how I, you know, well, I'll just say this. Secretly, I've always prayed. I grew up in a split religion home. My family's like the UN. We've got people from Guatemala, Denmark, Argentina, New York. Like all the different political battles are in my family. Super left, super right, libertarians, lefties to the, you know, it's crazy. Thanksgivings can be difficult.
Yeah.
But I'll say this, you know, I absolutely pray. I absolutely love that the idea, but also what for me is really a deep belief, which is that we can't control everything. We're not in as much control as we think we are. And that the magnificence of biology and the magnificence of nature is, it's impossible for me to conceive how that could come about any other way. It just is. Now, yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, full stop.
Who do you pray to?
That's an interesting one because I think God. Yeah. So I absolutely do. I've actually started reading the Bible recently, start to finish. I feel like it's my duty to like learn and in some sense compare Old and New Testament. I'm really interested in the stories, but I'm fascinated by the story of us, right? And the story of everything. And so, but yeah, I pray out loud in the morning. Sometimes again in the middle of the night if I wake up. And it's only recently that I've been doing this more often.
It's giving you peace? Or?
Oh, my goodness. It's given me so much. It's given me peace. And, you know, this is going to sound weird and probably people are going to be like, what are you talking about? If this, it works. It works. There's a way in which certain things I was grappling with, you know, I just couldn't resolve. I couldn't do it. And it was all internal, and I just couldn't do it.
How were you trying to resolve these things? Like have an answer?
Yeah, discipline myself. I mean, it wasn't like I was super, you know, undisciplined. I mean, obviously I have a lot of self-discipline, but you know, I always pray, you know, I want to remove my defects of character. I always wanted to have a deeper relationship to God. I always wanted that. And I kind of was like, why don't I have that? Well, duh. That's like saying, I want to be fit. Why I'm not fit? Well, because you're not running, you're not lifting, you're not doing the things. It was like, and it was a couple of different people that kept showing up in my life and they were doing it. And it was like, well, pray. And, you know, I've learned, and I certainly try and do this, that a lot of prayer is about listening. And a lot of prayer is about you ask for things or listen for things. And then an hour later, 2 days later, you go, wait, like it doesn't happen in the moment necessarily, just like fitness. I don't want to compare fitness. I don't want to trivialize prayer by comparing to fitness, but there's some parallels that are relevant. Yeah.
It's consistent work.
Yeah, it's consistent work. And then all of a sudden, like things come up and you're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. That makes so much sense.
Man, I tell you what, there's so much to unpack with, to unpack with all of that. I mean, if again, you may not know who Andrew Huberman is. You may not really, the profoundness of what he just said may not strike a chord with you because you don't know him. But this is a guy who is a huge, major presence online. Again, big into big into the online community of self-help. He's big into in the fitness community. He's known. He's been on every single major podcast that seems out there. He has his own podcast. And so, again, he's got respect in sort of pop culture. He's got respect in the academic world. And so for him to say some of this stuff, I mean, I heard this clip and I was just like, man, this is amazing. And just some of the stuff he said, you know, he just how much he is in awe of the brain and biology and how you can't look at that without being in awe. And it just kind of makes me echo some of the scriptures in the Bible where it talks about us being in awe of God by looking at nature. But then he went on to say some just profound things. And again, I'm not going to go back through his clip and just analyze every line, but he just said things you can't just gloss over. And that is, you know, you just come to realize we can't control everything. And we live in a world that we're determined that we can control things. And the more we try to control, the more we realize we're out of control. That makes us freak out because we're out of control, that when our response is to try to control. And so we live in this crazy cycle of trying to control things we can't control, that makes us feel out of control, that makes us want to get back in control, that makes us feel out of control. And then we're just overcome with anxiety and fear and we just shut down. And he kind of says, you know, this is sort of the baseline of it. Which then, I love it because he said it kind of brought him back to this interest in reading the Bible. And just sort of, I mean, I love that, right? It sort of talked about understanding the old and new and the correlation there. We talked about that in our podcast several weeks ago. But then I love it. He said the thing that has brought him is tremendous peace. Why? Because it works. Because they were things being resolved in him internally. Now, again, now if I said that, you're like, well, of course you say that because you're a professed Christian. You believe in God. Not only that, but if you know anything about me, I'm a pastor. I've been a minister for over 25 years. And so, you know, it's kind of like, well, that you're expected to say that, right? I've been a Christian for my entire life. I grew up in a Christian home. So it's kind of like, yeah, of course you say that. This guy has not. In fact, he said, I grew up in a very crazy home, a lot of different stuff going on, but he's saying these things and how much peace it's brought him and the fact that it works because it's brought a resolution internally in him. But I love that part. And this is the part that draws back to Jesus. He said he's praying to remove the defects of character. What's that sound like? It sounds like you want to be more like Jesus because he had the perfect character. He was perfect. So I'm trying to remove personal character defects. That means I'm trying to become more like Jesus Christ. And I love that. The fact he said, you know, you can't complain this stuff wasn't working. He said, I wasn't praying. And he said, but prayer isn't just about talking. Prayer is about listening. And you pray and you listen and you wait. And sometimes the answer comes on in the day or week or a month. And a lot of us don't work because we get impatient. I mean, you can't get a better endorsement on belief in God and what God does and what prayer is and belief and all that and becoming more like Jesus Christ than this right here. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. I mean, again, that's not coming from the popular pulpits of Christianity. That's coming from a man who has a reputation on the line that could get canceled by making that statement. He said, hey, I'm just going to come out and say, I believe in God and I pray to God. Well, that's not a big deal for me to say that. I'm just a nobody with a small little podcast here. This guy has got a huge millions and millions of followers on Facebook, YouTube, could get canceled. So I'm telling you, that's what I'm saying. This is what Just Jesus is about. There's a message out there, and that message is starting to grow, but it's not growing just because people that should believe it are getting on board. It's growing because, in fact, there's a scripture that says if we hold our peace, the rocks are going to cry out. I believe this is a reference to that. These are rocks that are crying out. So you know what? the church and religion has kept God in a box. It's kept Jesus locked away. It said you got to be good and act good and do good to find Jesus. And Jesus has said, listen, my message and who I am is for everybody. I didn't die for the good people. I died for everybody. And so this is just furthering that message. So then we go a little further here. And this is actually a clip that I came across. I was listening to some stuff that Jordan Peterson was saying about who Jesus was. And I came across this interview he was doing with Dr. John Lennox. Now, if you don't know who Dr. John Lennox is, I didn't know who Dr. John Lennox is. He is a British mathematician and philosopher of science. He comes from, he has a PhD in mathematics from Oxford. Sounds so official, Oxford. I mean, if you say you're from Oxford, it just sounds good. He served as a professor of mathematics at Oxford. I mean, you know, I go to the University of Oxford. It just sounds so prestigious. But he's also a huge Christian apologist. And he has an amazing take on who Jesus is. Now, again, he doesn't fit with the category of the other three men. He actually is a professed Christian, professes and believing God. But I love how he describes Jesus Christ in a very non-traditional way. Let's take a listen.
Now, that dovetails with the idea that the Logos as a personality, so that would be the Judeo-Christian concept, can investigate the Logos of the universe and that those things dovetail. So now, I know that's a complicated mishmash of ideas, but I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
Well, I think there's a lot in that, actually. And I recall listening to you give a very interesting lecture on Genesis 1. And when you came to the statement that human beings are made in the image of God, you paused and you pointed out that this was the cornerstone of our civilization. And I agree with that entirely. I think that what Dawkins is saying actually points in the exact opposite direction to what his worldview is, which is atheism, of course. In other words, that we can read off from creation something about the idea of a creator. And as you say, it dovetails perfectly. Let me put this another way. I'm a mathematician by background and a linguist. I love language, and mathematics is a very sophisticated language, but I love natural languages as well. And it seems to me that where this fits together best is first in the fact that we can do science, in the sense that there is a rational intelligibility to the universe, which is the foundation of modern science and is a legacy of the biblical worldview. So that the mathematical describability, Einstein talked about, he couldn't imagine any genuine scientist without faith in that. It's the axiom for doing science is to believe the universe is intelligible. But if you ask for the rationale behind that, why do we believe the universe is intelligible? It bears the imprint of a creator. And I see that at the level of mathematics, it has capacity to, at least in part, give us a handle on what's out there. And also in biology, where we have at the heart of every living cell the longest word we've ever found, the genetic code. And all of that leads me to formulate it as follows, that we live in a word-based universe. And that's the key of the Logos for me.
Okay, and so what do you mean in that case? So what do you mean specifically that we live in a word-based universe? What does that mean for you on the broader conceptual landscape?
Well, it means that this universe is not simply a product of natural, unguided forces. It is a product of a rational creator, an intelligent creator, and I believe even more than that, a personal creator. Now, how I get there is only in part from a response to the universe as I find it, the point you made about each organism being a microcosm of its environment. It's also, it seems to me that there are two major sources of knowledge. There is, first of all, observing the universe, science, etc. Then there are the humanities. But there's also the concept of revelation, in which I believe. In other words, it's not simply the human quest for the creator. It's the creator revealing himself. So for me, the anchor point in the end is that the Logos became human and we beheld his glory. In other words, we can see exactly what this means in terms of what we can understand. That is the human being in which God encoded himself in Christ. Now, those are big ideas, of course. They're very deep ideas. They need unpacking. But that's essentially where I'm coming from.
I'm telling you what, it's hard to listen to this. And again, I know this is sort of a different take on it, but it's hard to listen to this without just there being such an increase to your faith. I mean, these again, the credibility of the speakers. These are not just guys who are on the street corner with a megaphone yelling at a crowd walking by, randomly shouting out sort of non-coherent, unrelated, decontextualized threats trying to get people to confess or believe in Jesus Christ. These are men with great intellectual knowledge, with tremendous amount of clout, with a tremendous amount of validity to who they are. And the way they're discussing this, and just, I mean, again here, you're saying, what does this have to do with Jesus? And he kind of made the statement at the end, and that is the Logos becoming human. And we're going to read here just for a moment, just to kind of give you context of why that's so important. The book of John, now I said this before, if you don't know this, the Gospels are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those are 4 books in the Bible. We call we group them together. We call them the Gospels. The reason we call them the Gospels is because they are the books that deal with the life of Jesus Christ, the life and the death of Jesus Christ, and life, death, resurrection of Jesus Christ. So these books are vitally important if we want to know about Jesus. And so the one book in particular, John, has a very interesting history, and I won't have a chance to go into that at this moment. But John begins his book. This is John's gospel, his version, his telling of who Jesus is. And this is how John starts it off. John chapter 1. And I would encourage you, if you've never read this, to go read this. This is a powerful, amazing verse of Scripture, especially in the context of what we just heard. But this is what John says to open up his gospel, or his story about who Jesus is. He says this: in the beginning was the Word. Now, the word there sounds like word, you know the word. But the word is a translation of the Greek. Now, not to get too deep into this, but the Bible was really written in 2 separate languages. Half of it, or most of the Old Testament, which is a little more than half, was written in Hebrew. The New Testament, which includes the Gospels, was written in Greek. And so when we talk about the word logos is a Greek word. So when we translated that Greek word logos into English language, the equivalent word was word. But when we say word, we're actually saying logos, which is why Dr. Lennox just said there, the logos became flesh. Because it says here, in the beginning was the Logos, or the Word. And the Logos, the Word, was with God, and the Logos was God. Now, let's do this real quick. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, right? That's pure, simple mathematics. If the Word was there, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, that means God and the Word are the same, correct? And all things... And he was in the beginning with God, and all things were created through him. Without him, nothing was created. And in him was life, and the life was the light of mankind. The light shines in darkness, but the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. And this is talking about, we talked about John the Baptist proclaiming who Jesus was. But let's skip down here if we can. Verse 14, the Logos became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory, the glory of the only Son of the Father, full of grace and truth. Now let's look at this. Who was the Logos became flesh and dwelt among us? Because he was the Son of God. Well, that's Jesus. So when Dr. Lennox is discussing this and he's talking about the Logos, he's talking about Jesus. And he says that the Logos becomes human, that's Jesus, and that God encoded himself in this human form, which is we call Christ. But I love the couple things he said there that were so powerful. First of all, he was echoing something Jordan Peterson had already talked about, that the human beings made in the image of God is the cornerstone of our civilization. That's a powerful statement. That's a heavy statement. But that the genetic code is the longest word we know, our DNA, our genetic code, but we live, and this was awesome, we live in a word-based universe. Okay, now get this. If we live in a word-based universe, and Jesus is the ultimate word, the Logos, then wouldn't it come to realize that the greatest key to unlocking the universe that we live in is through Jesus? Because we live in a word-based universe. And he says that the universe was not a product of unguided forces, but, and I love how he phrased it, this was beautiful, but a personal creator. That speaks of Jesus Christ, because Jesus is a personal God. He's not a distant God. He's not someone that's stuck in a temple or stuck. We've tried to put him in a temple, but he's not someone stuck in a building or a temple that you go to worship. He's everywhere, all places. He's right where you are right now. That's what makes Jesus so special. He wants a personal relationship with you. But the biggest thing, and I love this, was he said science and humanity help us make sense of the world, but revelation. And what is revelation? It's the creator revealing himself to his creation. I mean, that was absolutely fantastic, because that's exactly right. You can study God scientifically. You can study Jesus Christ scientifically or for humanity's sake. But the greatest thing to know about Jesus Christ is when he reveals himself to you. That's what's powerful. In fact, Jesus asked them, we talked about this on the podcast before, Jesus asked his disciples, his original followers, who do men say that I am? They said, they gave him a question. And he asked them, who do you say that I am? Because he was trying to say, I'm revealing myself to you. Jesus' greatest desire, get this, Jesus' greatest desire in every person is to reveal himself to you. He wants to show you who he is, not because you heard it from somewhere, from me or a podcast or a pulpit. He doesn't want you to know someone else's version. He wants you to know who he is for yourself. He wants to be a personal creator. He wants to reveal himself to you. All you have to do is ask. That's what Andrew Huberman said. If you ask and you listen and you wait, he's going to do it. He's going to, because it works. He said that. So again, this is major stuff. This is profound stuff that's not coming from religion. It's coming from the outside of religion, which to me provides more validity, especially in the divisive world we live in, where if you have any take on who Jesus is, you're getting canceled or knocked off the air, or your show's being canceled, or you're being, ostracized because you can't believe in Jesus. That makes you this and makes you that. And these are men with tremendous reputations and tremendous things on the line, and yet they're professing this is the way it is. Where they're coming from it from a non-Christian, non-religious angle, which to me brings actually in some ways more validity. Because when Jesus came to this earth, he came in a non-religious, non-expected vehicle, which that's why so many who were religious missed it. So again, that's when I say this is Just Jesus podcast. This is not about trying to promote religion. We're talking about Jesus. And when we say Jesus, we're not using Jesus as a synonym for religion. But within that same context, so Dr. Lennox discussed, and again, I want to say this again, I'm not endorsing any of these men. I'm not suggesting you go out there and become a follower and you start following all their stuff. I'm not saying that. In fact, I haven't even listened to most of their stuff. So I don't know what's out there. There may be some squirrely stuff out there, and I'm not endorsing you go out there, but I'm using these as examples. I figure in the Bible, if God can use a donkey, he can use a fish. God can use any voice that's necessary to get his message out there. So I'm not equating these guys to donkeys or fish. I'm just simply saying that who am I to judge the vehicle if it's promoting the message of Jesus Christ? So within the same context, Dr. Lennox kind of, and Jordan Peterson, that was the voice you heard at the beginning, they were discussing this idea of logos. We're going to go a little further in that, because then this is in another separate interview. This is Jordan Peterson's take on logos. Take a listen.
So what you have in the figure of Christ is an actual person who actually lived, plus a myth. And in some sense, Christ is the union of those two things. The problem is I probably believe that, but I don't know. I'm amazed at my own belief, and I don't understand it. Like, because I've seen sometimes the objective world and the narrative world touch. You know, that's Jungian synchronicity. Yeah. And I've seen that many times in my own life. And so in some sense, I believe it's undeniable. You know, we have a narrative sense of the world. For me, that's been the world of morality. That's the world that tells us how to act. It's real. Like, we treat it like it's real. It's not the objective world. But the narrative and the objective world touch. And the ultimate example of that, in principle, is supposed to be Christ. But I don't know what to... that seems to me oddly plausible.
Yeah.
But I still don't know what to make of it. It's too... partly because it's too terrifying a reality to fully believe. I don't even know what would happen to you if you fully believed it.
If you believed in the story of Christ, or if you believed that history and let's say the narrative meet, let's
both, I think. I think you, because when you believe that, you buy both those stories. You believe that the narrative and the objective can actually touch.
Well, I mean, first of all, I love his sort of raw emotion to just standing in awe of coming to grips with seeing this and sort of coming to grips with the reality of this heavy weight of coming face to face with the reality of the fact that Jesus Christ is real. And I loved something he said. Now it was a little deep, a little philosophical. So let me try to break it down just for a second so you really understand the magnitude of what he was saying. He said Jesus Christ is the place where the objective world and the narrative world come together. If you don't know what those terms are, in a simple way, the objective world is the world that exists and goes on around us, regardless of our personal feelings or our beliefs, perception about it. It's just simply it's the world that exists outside of sort of outside of our human self, our own human intervention, our human thoughts, feelings, and thought. It's the objective world. And the narrative world, we're saying, is sort of where we get sort of our feelings, our moral guide. And he said that Jesus Christ is the connection point, the intersection where these two worlds meet. I mean, what a powerful descriptive way of describing who Jesus is, because he is God. If God was the Word and the Word was God, and they're the same, and the Word became flesh, that means God became flesh and was called Jesus Christ. So God in Jesus being the same thing. And if God is the creator, that means Jesus Christ is also the creator. And if he was the creator of the objective world and also the creator of the narrative world, then he ultimately becomes the point by which these two intersect. And that's what he's saying. When you come to come to this revelation, this realization, you almost stand in awe of this, because this is the basis of human, what it means to be human. This is the absolute essence of humanity. And the entire cosmos, it's all centered upon this one central figure, and that's Jesus Christ. And I loved his sort of raw emotion to that realization. And again, I don't believe, I may be wrong on this, but I haven't looked it up enough to know. I don't know if he actually professes, I don't think he professes to be a Christian. I think his daughter just became Christian, but I don't think he's a Christian. But he professes this awe and understanding of who Jesus Christ is, and that's what we're talking about today with Just Jesus. But just a tremendous, again, so we have this take on, so Andrew Huberman's tremendous description about God and sort of all the attributes that come along with just being in all of biology and all this stuff. And then we're going to get into John Lennox's take on the logos and the creator and the personal creator and the encoding, and that we live in a word-based universe, and Jesus being the ultimate expression of the word. And then going further with this idea of the objective world and narrative world coming together and centered on Christ is just profound. But the last clip I want to show with you or share with you today is the one I teased it earlier about the Joe Rogan clip. Now, again, Joe Rogan covers a lot of topics, and I am not endorsing Joe Rogan at all. Not suggesting you even go listen to his stuff. I came across this clip. It has become pretty wildly circled in religious worlds in Christian worlds, because it is somewhat of an interesting take that Joe Rogan would even say these words. Now, that's the point. I'm not suggesting he believes this, but the fact that he would even say this is profound to me. That this guy, who is obviously massive, who has a very, he's got his political views, his societal views, they're all over the place in some ways. But for him to make this statement to me is sort of like, hey, there's a lot of people that might pipe up and go, okay, I might need to take a listen to this, take a look at this Jesus character because of what Joe Rogan said. Whereas if I said Jesus, they'll dismiss me. So again, like I'm saying, this is about the message of Jesus Christ being shared with whomever, however we can get this message out there, because it's just Jesus, not religion, not doctrine, not theology. It's Jesus. So take a listen to this. Now, the first voice you'll hear is actually Aaron Rodgers. He is the was a quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. He is now quarterback of the New York Jets. He is kind of, I don't know, he's out there a little bit. He's into a lot of different stuff. He's studied a lot of different things. And so he has some different takes on it. But they're having this conversation, and this is where the conversation goes, and it ends up landing on Joe Rogan making a pretty amazing statement.
But don't you think there has to be some sort of field of value that can orient people into like, hey, let's do things a little bit better because these things actually matter. There is right and wrong. There is morality. Yeah. There is certain
Well, unfortunately, the problem with living in a secular society and living in a society that has a lot of people that are atheists, that have no belief system at all, is you find a belief system, and that's a lot of these people that call themselves atheists, or they've subscribed to the religion of woke. Their God is equity and inclusiveness. Their God is this ideology that they think that you have to subscribe to. And that's why it's spooky, because human beings seem to have a very strong desire for some sort of order and form and some sort of pattern that they can follow that seems to be the right way to go. And they can be led by cults, they can be led by groups of people, they can be led by intolerant governments and evil armies and corrupt politicians. They can be led. But I think as time rolls on, people are going to understand the need to have some sort of divine structure to things, some sort of belief in the sanctity of love and of truth. And a lot of that comes from religion. A lot of people's moral compass and the guidelines that they've used to follow to live a just and righteous life has come from religion. And unfortunately, a lot of very intelligent people, they dismiss all of the positive aspects of religion because they think that the stories are mere superstitious fairy tales, that they have no place in this modern world, and we're inherently good and your ethics are based on your old moral compass and we all have one. And that's not necessarily true. We need Jesus. I think, for real. Like, if he came back now, it'd be great. Like, Jesus, if you're thinking about coming back
right now,
now's a good time.
Yeah, pretty soon. Yeah,
now's a good time.
Well, there's a lot of people that think that might be coming.
Well, it might be.
Mark of the beast. If there is the Christianity part and Jesus wants to come back and save everything,
it'd be good right around now.
Yeah.
Like, don't wait till the election.
Again, you had to throw that election thing at the bottom. I actually don't disagree with them. Not looking forward to this narrative of this year as we head towards election. But, he said that we need Jesus for real. But the thing he said there that I want to really step out is that no matter if you're atheist, no matter what you profess to believe in, we are all going to find a belief system. So an atheist that says, I don't believe in God, they're believing in something. And I love that he said it. He said, now this is what he said. This wasn't me or someone that's, got some other agenda. This is what he said, he goes, you know, you may not have it. Your God is the God of woke, God of equity, equality, and inclusiveness. I mean, goodness gracious, that's some heavy stuff right there. But to me, the biggest thing that sticks out is the fact is you're going to find a belief system. No matter what you profess to be, you're going to land on something to believe in. My choice, my desire, what I've chosen for my life is I've found that my belief system has landed on Jesus Christ. Now, you may not be there yet, but you believe in something. You're going to have something that's the foundation of everything that you do. That's the foundation of belief. It might be in whatever it might be. It might be, I mean, the list is endless on what these things could be. But me, personally, I have chosen to land on Jesus Christ being the foundation of my entire belief system and my entire life, because whatever you believe in becomes the foundation of your entire existence, because that's how powerful faith is. Faith is the foundation of everything for us. Even if you don't confess to believe in God, you believe in something. You believe in humanity. You believe in good works. You believe in whatever, you know, justice, whatever you, peace, whatever you believe in something, and that becomes the foundation of everything you do. I've chosen to believe in Jesus Christ. And I came across this, someone, actually my wife found this. I think it's popular out there. I'm sure it's been circulated. I'm sure you probably have seen it, but I thought it was really good. It's called Choose Your Hard. And this is the quote: marriage is hard, divorce is hard, choose your hard. Obesity is hard, being fit is hard, choose your hard. Being in debt is hard, being financially disciplined is hard, choose your hard. Communication is hard, not communicating is hard. Life will never be easy, it will always be hard, but we can choose our hard. Now that's a great, tremendously, challenging quote. But I'll take that. It says, you can believe in something. Life will never be without belief. You're going to believe in something. Even if you don't believe in something, you're still believing in something. The question is, for all of us, we get to choose what we believe in. I choose, or I have chosen, to believe in Jesus Christ. And that's what the whole basis of Just Jesus is that I'm saying that greatest thing, the best thing for anyone to believe in and build their life upon, and that is the foundation of Jesus Christ. There's nothing better. Nothing will change you. Nothing will have a better, more powerful effect on your life than that. And here are four individuals, three of them by which have a lot of reputation and are not confessed to be Christians or even followers of Jesus Christ, that make this statement, that the foundation of this, having a foundation of belief in God is foundational. But even Joe Rogan said, we need Jesus for real. So I echo that statement. We need Jesus for real. We do. And so he said, Jesus, if you're listening, come back for the election. I'll just say it this way. Jesus, I know you're listening. So I pray, Lord, that you would reveal yourself to those that are listening today in a fresh and new way. Jesus, you know every person that's listening today. You know where they are. You know what they're facing in their life. And I ask that you would reveal yourself to them, because you said, Lord, if we seek, we would find. If we would knock, it would be open. So, Lord, I ask today that those who are seeking would find, those that are knocking would have the door open in front, that they would find you in a new way. So, amen. Well, Just Jesus podcast episode number 8. I had a blast. That was I hope that was enriching and challenging for you, listening to these sort of different takes on who God is and Jesus, and coming from a different angle, because I think it's important. I'm telling you, the rocks are crying out, meaning there's voices that are coming from outside of the religious circles, and it's not endorsed by Christianity and in religion. In fact, the religion's trying to silence it. My point is, why silence something that's for Jesus? We have enough in this world that's against Jesus. Let's promote anything that's for Jesus. Because to me, Jesus is very capable of straightening the details out. Let's just start with him. Leave the details up to him. because he's been doing this a lot longer than I have or you have. And if things continue, he'll be doing it long after we're gone. So let's just keep it with just Jesus. Until next time, thank you for listening. As always, please like, subscribe, share this. This is helping grow the channel, helping grow our podcast, reaching people with the message of Jesus Christ. Until next time, God bless.